said, I do it. I've ever dealt with
Rolling.
me about.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the workshop of July 2nd. We are here to discuss the water rate study. And Val, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Penny?
Here.
Commissioner Curry?
Here.
Commissioner Danio?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Mayor Via?
Here. And so at this time, Joe, do you want to take it over?
Yeah, this is, we engaged with Raftellus to do the utility rate study. It's been 5 years since the last time we did this, and we did it last time with Stantec, and some of the players from Stantec now work for Raftellus. So we're kind of going with similar people, but a different company. So, so we're at the point now where we need to present the information to the commission, get your feedback, make sure you understand everything that's involved, because what we're talking about is capital projects in the future and how are they going to be funded, what we need to do to maintain the facility. So all that is kind of put into play, and then they've come up with a recommended rate increase for the water and sewer, which we would like to get that implemented in October as we start the next 5-year process. So I'm going to turn it over, and I'm sorry I forgot your name.
Sean.
Sean. We'll turn it over to Sean unless you have any other questions. And as we go through this, if you have questions, then stop him and he'll answer them. One comment that he did make when we started this is the fact that we did the rate increases the last 5 years actually put us in a pretty good position now moving forward for the next 5 years. So we're not as bad off as some may think, or some would have thought that we would be, so we're actually going to be pretty good.
Great, thank you, Joe. Sean, if you'd like to introduce yourself, we are recording the meeting, so, and then you can go into your presentation.
Sure. My name is Sean Ocasio. I'm with Raftellus Financial Consultants. I've been the project manager on this engagement with the city. So as was mentioned, we are doing a revenue sufficiency analysis, an update to the study that was done a number of years ago. And as a part of that, what we're looking at is essentially the forecast of revenues in order to cover the costs of operating the system. So that would be covering the costs of operations, maintenance, and personnel costs, as well as your capital needs, your annual debt service payments, and transfers, and so on.
And just keep in mind that this is the financial side of things. If you have any technical questions, Joseph and Antoine are here, and they can explain anything as far as the capital work that's being projected.
So, as was mentioned, the last study was done in fiscal year 2019, and you adopted a series of rate increases. They were 5.5% a year for both systems for fiscal years 20 through 2024. So this was the last year of the previously adopted rate path. And as a result of that, that implementation of those rates, it has left the utility in a good position with a strong operating fund balance in terms of cash on hand, projected cash flows for 2024 being positive, as well as a strong debt service coverage margin for the year. And so just as a term definition, debt service coverage is essentially a ratio that's required to be met as a part of your loan agreements. And what it says is that your gross revenues of the system, so that's to say your rate revenues and any miscellaneous charge revenues that you bring in, those revenues minus your operating expenses, that would be personnel costs, chemical costs, all those sorts of treatment and operation type items, those revenues minus those expenses will give you a net revenue number. That net revenue number, as it compares to your annual debt payment, that's what coverage is. It's that ratio, that relationship there. And what your loan agreement says, you have to make a certain margin over those payments. And so what we're looking at is, at least for fiscal year 2024, that the margin there is strong and above the required levels for your loan agreements. A couple of things I wanted to mention on the front end was, you are in a rising cost environment. In terms of consumer price index, just from just looking back to fiscal year 2019, it's gone up about 20%. In terms of construction materials index, so that impacts your capital side, that's gone up about 41% since 2019. And chemical index that we looked at, industrial chemicals index, that's gone up about 25% since 2019. So all your costs, and everyone's feeling this. It's not just the city. It's all our clients. They're feeling these impacts to increases in capital costs for projects, increases in operating costs in order to run their systems. So one thing I'd note there is that the city has been pursuing grant funding to go towards its capital projects, and that's providing quite a benefit to the system. I'll get into that a little further when we get to the capital side, but just wanted to mention that at the front end there. Next slide. Oh, thanks. You beat me to
I'm
it.
trying to stand up.
In terms of what we're doing, what we're looking at is we're developing a forecast of the system's revenues, the gross revenues of the system. So that would be your rate revenues, your other miscellaneous revenues, your impact fees, and we're comparing them to your what we call gross revenue requirements, which is just a fancy way of saying the sum of your operating expenses, your debt payments, your capital, and any required transfers that you have. And what we're looking at is a forecast period of fiscal year 2024 through fiscal year 2029. And what we've done is we've developed a projection of those revenues and of those revenue requirements. And in so doing, we've also looked at a funding strategy to make sure the capital plan is fully funded. As a part of the analysis, we're also looking at your cash reserve targets, making sure that there's adequate liquidity in the system to handle any contingency events, or unexpected capital, things of that nature. And we're looking at other financial performance requirements such as your debt service coverage ratio as being one of the big ones there. So then in looking at all of that, we're looking at the adequacy of your rate revenues in order to cover all those costs. That's kind of the balancing act that's demonstrated there in the graphic. So some of the major goals in doing that analysis, we want to make sure that we maintain a positive cash flow position for the utility system through the end of the forecast period, being fiscal year 2029, and that's the goal of the inflows to the system would be equal to the outflows of the system without the use of reserves. Understanding there will be use of reserves to fund certain projects and items and other things, but overall that the rates are sufficient to cover those costs. We want to make sure that we're in compliance with the system's debt service related covenants, the rate coverage covenants that I mentioned a moment ago. You have a couple loans on the system. Some of them are what we call senior lien. It just means in terms of who has first claim on the payment, the senior lien debt would get paid first, subordinate lien would get paid second, and that would be your SunTrust bonds and your SRF loans. Each of those has their own respective terms in terms of what the required coverages are. For the senior lien obligations, it's 120%. That margin on the net revenues as they compare to your debt payment. For the SRF loans, the coverage requirement is 115%. And what we look at also is just an all-in health metric, a target. It's not required, but it's a target metric of 150% on all debt. And that's a common one that we see the lending community look at. So then the other, if you were to think of it in three main points, we're trying to balance cash flow with coverage and then cash balances. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that the system maintains an adequate operating reserve for the forecast period. Again, so that you can be able to handle unexpected capital, storm events, things of that nature. Based on discussions with the city, the required minimum balance in the fund is a 90-day target of operating revenues. And then we were looking at a 120-day target as a minimum balance. And that's a pretty common metric when we're looking at overall health. Again, 120 days plus.
And we have 300 days right now. Right?
As of the close of fiscal year 2023, yes. So then moving ahead, in terms of customers growth and the revenue side, currently the city provides service to just under 8,000 accounts, about 7,900 accounts as of the close of fiscal year 23. We've also assumed a baseline growth as a part of the revenue stream. That's a growth of about 1.1% a year, or about 73 accounts on average. I would note there is the growth that was developed with the city. That includes Zen Apartments, Bentley Oaks, Fox Point, Tiki Villas, and Vineyard. So we made sure to try to get all the recent growth that's in the near-term window built into this forecast so that it reflects everything accurately for the revenue. In terms of the combined system rate revenues, at existing rates for today, it's about $7.9 million in fiscal year 2024, and that's projected to increase to about $8.4 million by 2029. Again, building in for that growth that we talked about just a moment ago. The system has other revenues as well that it brings in related to service fees, penalties, miscellaneous type charges for the utility system, as well as interest income that it earns on the balances that it has in the bank. And those revenues come in at about $524,000 per year is what's projected for the forecast period. Another revenue source that the system has is also impact fee revenues. Those are revenues that are based on fees that you collect from new growth and development. So when there's a new development coming online, they pay impact fees to buy into their share of the capacity of the system. That's about $180,000 per year on average, again, based on the baseline customer growth that we talked about.
So let me just confirm with you the account, 7,900 accounts. What is that made up of?
In terms of,
Those are meters?
that would be accounts of the system for the water system. So there'd be, in terms of billing entries, about, I think it's probably more than that in terms of meters. It's comprised of all your accounts, so residential, multi-unit, and commercial accounts. That breakdown is roughly about 4,500 would be about residential.
So for example, if, like Marina Grande, that's a single account, but it's got 400 users, does it take that into account? Or not necessarily?
You think it's too low?
I think it's too high.
Too high. Yeah, my question is, if it's 7,900 accounts and it's the existing rate total is 7.9 million, that's $1,000 a year or $83 a month. Why is that so low compared to? Isn't that our minimum bill?
$89, I thought.
What is our minimum bill, Michelle?
No, our minimum bill, I believe, is, well, I can go double check.
I guess I'm
but
thinking
it's-
commercial.
but
Commercial's
it's
more,
lower
right?
than that.
Not much though, right?
Yeah, let me just go verify both of these items.
Well, minimum bill, I would think would be around $25, just the base charges for water and wastewater service.
Oh, so that's, okay, that's not
doesn't
taking
include solid
into,
waste.
Not having the garbage, you gotta take the garbage out.
so that's just water and sewer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that makes sense, thank you.
And is growth calculated on past growth, the 1.1%?
No, what we did, we also, I'm sorry, Sean, but,
No.
yeah, we also gave them the future developments Brian had provided, what's
Okay.
coming in the near future, so it's everything from, Fox Point, Bentley Oaks, whatever's up there on, Zen Living.
Okay.
So that's all being included in
Yeah,
that?
so we projected
figure. Okay.
there.
Yeah, for Zen, there was 120 units. For Vineyards, it was 134 units, Bentley Oaks 16,
Okay.
Fox Point 17. Those were all layered in there.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Because I would imagine at the end of this, the growth is, at some point, it's gonna stop. We're gonna be built out.
Never,
Yeah.
never say that.
We're gonna be built out pretty soon.
We go up.
Yeah, you can go up.
Have you been down Flemish lately? They're building fast. A lot of people in there.
So switching gears from the revenue side to the revenue requirement side or the expenditure side, I want to take some time and talk about the operating expenses of the system. So what we did in order to develop the forecast of operating expenses, we first look at the city's FY 2024 budget document for the utility system. And then from there, we make certain adjustments. So the total budget was about $8.4 million in total expenditures. And that includes capital projects, and that includes payments for debt service, or your loan payments. What we were doing is we adjust
79.
off of that total $8.4 million number, the capital and the annual debt service payments. And that's in order to get to just the raw operating expense number. So your recurring operating expenses, which would be your personnel cost, chemical cost, power, everything to run the system, again, because we're trying to make sure we can calculate that coverage number. So we do account for debt and for capital in the forecast, just in a different place. So this is just speaking to the operating expenses side. We also built in some contingency for bad debt, contingency on operating costs, and then as well as a margin for bad debt. That's worth about $114,000 per year that's built in. So in terms of the adjusted operating expenses, again, for those items I mentioned, it's about $6.1 million in fiscal year 2024, projected to increase to about $8.2 million by fiscal year 2029. That's an average annual rate of change of about 6.2% per year on average. And the increases therein include various escalation factors, labor at a 5% per year increase, health insurance costs at about 15% per year, fuel and chemicals about 6% per year, repair and maintenance about 3.5%, general inflation for some of your operating costs on average about 2.3% a year.
Michelle did confirm that 7,900 is accurate.
I have a quick question on the previous slide, I'm sorry. What about, were in the numbers calculated for future development, was the Flumich RV resort included in on that?
I gotta look for Brian to see if he has
No,
that. They're a single meter too there.
Yeah, it's gonna be one meter.
yeah, it's like a Marina Grande, it's 1 meter.
Oh, okay,
Single meter.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
7,901.
The big one though.
Yeah. Well, I didn't hear that project mentioned, that's why I wanted to ask.
Good catch.
So then from the operating cost side, then we're looking at your capital plan. And the projected capital plan for the utility system, again, for the forecast period, is just under $50 million, about $49.5 million. This plan includes water and wastewater plant improvements, asset renewal and replacements, and repairing of the system, as well as other capital items and equipment needs in order to maintain service. The plan is anticipated to be funded through use of rates and reserves and grants. And that's where I wanted to mention, like I did on the front end, the plan currently has built in about $27.8 million in grant-funded projects. That's over half the plan, about 56% of the plan. That's from ARPA and from the SAFI program. When we try to quantify that, that's a savings of, if you want to think of it as if you didn't get those grants, then you had to finance those projects in order to get them accomplished, then that would be roughly an annual debt service payment of about $1.7 million a year, give or take some interest rate assumptions and terms and whatnot. So that's an avoided cost based on being able to get those grants. So that's a benefit to the system, because that $1.7 million in terms of a potential rate impact would have been about, I believe, a 22% increase on top of what we're looking at. So there's some benefit, a good benefit there for the system pursuing those grants. The remainder of the capital plan, about $24.7 million, is funded through rates and reserves. It's about 44% of the plan. And again, that's use of your R&R funds, operating reserves, and just annual and monthly user rates. This here is just a graphical representation of the capital plan. The bars represent the cash outflows and the colors represent the funding source. So what we wanted to illustrate here was of the 49 million, just the magnitude of those that grant funding. That's what you see in the orangish gold color there at the top of all the bars. The plan is a little front-end heavy because you have some projects that are prioritized for right now to get them done. You'll see that's 15 million in the first year, 8.3 second year, 12.8 next year, and it starts to level out there. But that's the total spending curve for that $49.5 million there. So in addition to your operating costs and your capital costs, you also have existing loans on the system. In terms of their budgeted loan payment for this current fiscal year, it's about $884,000 in fiscal year 2024. That's comprised of the Water and Sewer System Improvement Revenue Bonds, Series 2005. You have revenue bonds for Series 2011. You also have 2 SRF loans that you're currently paying on, 709, 070, and 080. And then there's also a vac truck loan as well that's being paid on. The payments there are shown for each one of those, respectively $108,000, $345,000, $41,000, $329,000, and $61,000 total. One of the things I wanted to note is those debt payments will be decreasing over the forecast period as some of those loans get paid off and come offline. And you'll see the 2025 bonds will pay off in 25. The 2 SRF loans will pay off in 2027 and 2029. And actually the vacuum truck loan, which isn't on there, also gets paid off in 2025 as well.
Wait, I'm sorry, go back to that page one more time.
So that annual debt service payment will be decreasing from the 884 down to the 487 by the last year of the forecast period.
Perfect, thank you.
This graph here, it's a little busy, but it's essentially bringing all those items that we spoke about together. The bars on the chart represent the cash outflows projected on an annual basis, those revenue requirements, and the colors represent what those items are. So the red component would be the operating expenses, the orange component would be the debt service payments, the blue would be renewal and replacement funding, and then the dark blue capital funding for projects. And you'll see those bars increasing over time. That's based on the cost projections and funding the capital plan and everything. And what you'll see also on that graph is a dotted black line. That's the projected rate revenues at existing rates. So that's the rates today, but inclusive of that growth we talked about. And you'll see it's growing, but it's not keeping pace with those costs. Next slide, please. So then what we're seeing as the projection of rates going forward, in order to cover those costs, we're seeing on the water system a 2% increase in the bill per year for fiscal years 25 through 29. For the wastewater system, an increase of 4% per year. So that's an average bill increase of about 3.1% per year. And that would be for the next 5-year window.
So that's what we're looking to raise, 3.1.
On an average bill, yes, sir. The water side would be 2 and the wastewater would be 4.
As opposed to 5.5 like the last 5 years, is that what we're saying?
Yes, sir. So this is the same graph, just restated to also have a dotted blue line you see there. That would be the projected revenues with the proposed rate adjustments built in. And you'll see they're sufficient to cover the projected cost of the system.
So there really is no leeway there with the percentage of increase. Because if we don't do the increase that you just showed us, then we'll be short in the future years.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And you have to pull from reserves.
Okay.
But the catch to that is you can only do that for a finite period before you run out of reserves.
Right.
Can we look at the reserves? Do you have a graph showing?
Yes, sir. It's on the very next slide.
Okay, I thought I saw it in the package.
Okay.
So on this slide here, you'll see the reserves are going down a little bit over time. That's to fund capital and other items. And then you'll see the dotted yellow-orange line. That's the 90-day required minimum balance for the fund. And then the green dotted line would be the target 120 days. Now you notice we're a bit above that there, and that's available for contingency and capital. You also have, as a part of the system, not only an operating reserve, but an R&R fund. And so as far as the character of the monies, the surplus here could be available for capital purposes as needed as well. And on the next slide, there's a little more detail on some of the cash accounts. What we have here is, whereas the other was operating reserves, this is more capital reserves. The yellow is the renewal and replacement fund balance. The pinkish red would be the impact fee or development fees, and the blue would be the water development fee or impact fees. And you'll see that the balance is going down a little bit over time, but that's fine. It's still a sufficient reserve in order to cover capital needs going forward. It is meeting your minimum required balance for the R&R fund. You do have one of those as a part of your loan agreements as well, but it's a nominal $300,000, so you're exceeding that in all years. But you want to make sure that you have adequate funding in here to take care of unforeseen needs and to fund things on a pay-go basis.
Why does the R&R fund step down 1.1 million next year? Is that because of budgeting right now?
It's to fund certain projects.
So
A better answer would be is some of those grant monies we got, the $20 million and the funds that we're going after, they're going to, instead of doing some R&R projects, we're going to use those funds to kind of do a larger project and encompass some of those, so we lose some of those smaller projects. I think that's a better answer to your question.
Joe, is that what we were talking about when we were talking about the R&R fund and how to step up, start using some of that?
Well, yeah, you'll see that in the budget discussion on Tuesday, using some R&R funds to do some projects.
But is that what's reflected here, or is that without that
That's
adjustment?
not reflected here because we only discussed the R&R fund.
So then I guess explain it to me again, Joseph.
All right, so you know, we're working on getting $20 million from the state, right?
Right.
So as part of the wastewater plant, for example, what we're going to do is we're going to rebuild the high service pumps with that project. That would have been an R&R project, but we're going to use that other money to do that. So it replaces some of our annual short-term R&R projects with the bigger projects, free money we got.
But
But if you're
Joe,
getting
you
free
just
money,
said
why
it's
is your
not
capital
reflect-
reserve going
So
down?
Yeah.
that decrease there is for things that are projects already in the works that we've already committed fund balance to use.
okay,
Any new projects we're going to bring up Tuesday night.
we'll reduce that 2.9 further, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Does it make any sense to take some of the $6 million on the previous page and pay some of the debt service and get out of debt? Or what are the terms of
What
our?
are the total?
What are the terms of our debt compared to our rate of return
Depends on the interest
on these
rate.
investments?
Depending on how much interest rate we got.
Right, no, that's
The interest rates on those are probably below 3.
They are, and we're getting
Wow.
on the
5 and
loans.
6%.
Okay,
for-
all right, okay, never mind. I hate being in debt.
So
Me too.
over 10 years, it's like a 43% increase. All the cities are going up like 43% over 10 years.
We're going up 3%.
No, over 10 years though. We've already gone up 5 some each year, right?
Yes, you've done 5.5% per year for the past 5 years.
So that's 27.5%. Now we're looking to do 3.1 for 5 more years, right?
Yes, sir.
That's 15.5%. So over 10 years, it's 43%.
Yeah,
All
but
this costs keep
Commissioner,
increasing.
but when we started though, we were on the low end anyways, and that's why we had to make the adjustment so high. And then you look at all the increases, not only just in materials and and labor.
Well, if we didn't get that grant money, you said we have to go up another 22% over that 5-year period.
It would really be bad.
Yeah, but I'm saying, so like other cities that don't get the grant, they're gonna be going up, or is, I mean, we're not an isolated incident.
As I've seen other cities, they're all going up.
They are. We're working with a number of clients, and we're seeing some significant rate adjustments.
My water bill went up 14%.
40?
14
14.
per year.
And Commissioner, I think it's unrealistic to see no increases,
No, I
because
know.
a 2% increase on water, I mean, every year, I mean, you just look at labor costs alone, so.
The labor,
These-
materials, like you said, that's,
He's killing.
No, and not to diminish the fact that they are going up and have gone up historically, but at least it's been on an incremental basis. We do have some clients that down in South Florida, and one of them, they were somewhat proud of the fact that they hadn't raised rates in about 14 years, but now they're having to play quite a lot of catch-up.
Right.
And so now, in terms of a normal customer's budgeting, you're getting a bigger hit there, whereas at least this phased approach that you've been taking, both historically and projected to going forward, makes it at least a little bit more manageable. But you're right, they are going up, and pretty much all the municipalities that we're working with.
You gotta
are
raise the
seeing
cost of
that.
your pizzas.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let me think, 22%, okay, I guess you. Takes water to make dough.
So pay 75 cents for a slice of pizza, just start there.
So I mentioned also the coverage metric earlier about your loan requirements. With this projected rate adjustment trajectory, your loan requirements would be fulfilled, and the target that we look at for general health would also be quite fulfilled, in terms of 150% to be well above that. So the coverage would be projected to be strong for the forecast period. In terms of how you compare on an average bill, this would be a single-family bill for 3,000 gallons of flow for water and wastewater, and you're pretty much right about at the average. We surveyed some neighboring municipalities, and the average is about $70.60 for 3,000 gallons of water and wastewater flow. So you're pretty much right at the average, just going slightly above it with these increases. But what I would note here is, like we just talked about, all these other places are also raising their rates too. I know Port Orange has a multi-year rate adoption, so they're going to be raising theirs over time. Ormond Beach, I know they're working on a study to assess that. New Smyrna also has rates going up. Daytona, as well as City of Edgewater is also working on a study for a multi-year plan.
so
as
their
well.
increases aren't considered into, it's
That's
what it
correct.
currently is.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you're comparing yourselves today against everyone else today, but then also the rates for 25.
Okay.
How is Port Orange so low?
The larger cities, must be some economy of scales, because all the big cities
Right.
are on the left and all the small cities are on the right.
Other than Deltona?
Yeah.
Wow, look at that wastewater bill in Deltona.
Wow, that is big.
They must be rebuilding something.
They have a brand new, they have 2 plants in Deltona, and the brand new one is a huge debt service on it.
Oh,
And they've had to put a lot of infrastructure in to move the water to the new. Port Orange, I know, actually John McKinney, our finance director, works there. I've been talking with him. They're getting ready to build new plants, and their rates are gonna go.
Oh, really?
Yeah, their current wastewater plant is over by the railroad tracks there on Lawton.
Madeline, is it Madeline or something?
Yeah, that plant, but that plant is, they're getting ready to implode that plant, so I don't know what they're gonna do, but. So, anyway, infrastructure is an issue all the way around.
I guess we're sitting pretty nicely compared.
The grants put us in a really good, that's all I can tell you is, you can't imagine how these grants benefited this utility. Let's make sure we get it.
What did he ask?
We're gonna get.
We're working on it.
The asterisks were those that are either
Very hard.
have a multi-year rate plan adopted, or they do some form of indexing, or they're participating in a study to evaluate rates.
So Ormond Beach, for example, let's jump at that one real quick. They're working on a 100-acre pond. They have to buy land out by LP 90 on the other side of 95. Those rates are, all those projects are going to drive their rates way up. So we have an agreement with them, so we're going to partner with them in that pond. They're hoping to get grant money. But anyway, everybody has to get out of the river.
And that's gonna cost a lot of
It's
money.
gonna cost a lot of money. A lot of plants have to be rebuilt. Right now, our plant's designed to go to the river. When we go to reclaim, you have to have redundancy built in the plant. All these grants are paying for that redundancy put into our plants. So, like I said, we were in the right place at the right time.
Are our rates flipped? Is that graph wrong?
No, I just did that to make them pop out.
Okay, all right.
So in terms of overall observations, again, based on the forecast of operating expenses, capital needs, and debt service payments and so on, the present existing water and wastewater rates aren't projected to be sufficient to cover the costs through fiscal year 2029. Our recommendation would be to adopt the proposed multi-year plan similar to what was adopted previously. And these proposed rates are projected to maintain positive cash flow for the system, maintain adequate reserve balances, and maintain compliance with all your loan covenants in terms of coverage requirements. And then, of course, to revisit the plan, 3 to 5 year period again, as things change, your capital plan evolves, customer growth may come in differently than originally forecasted, changes in operations, things of that nature. So you want to make sure you keep pace with it like you have been doing historically.
So that was kind of the 20,000 foot level of this. What supported this summary was enormous spreadsheets of data and detail of each of the projects, of the cost, and manipulating that to see where it runs out over that 5 year period. So I don't want you to think that this is it. There's a lot of work that gets done behind the scenes that they did to come up with this summary.
We look at the budget on a line item basis. We're looking at all your loan agreements, making sure all that's built in, and then we have the payments and everything. We have the capital plan, we have the grant information. We've got historical trial balances in order to make sure we get a good sense of what the available resources are to phase things in. So he's absolutely right. It's a comprehensive analysis that we boiled down here to make it more digestible.
So I have a few questions. So on the water side, 2% increase, wastewater 4%. Is that because we take in more than we give? So
Well,
is it
yes,
just a
to the
cost
first
or-
question, yes. We take more than we produce water.
Yeah.
We produce 1.2 million, and the average is what, 1.6, 1.7 now?
We're on 1.8 right now.
1.8 right now. So that increase is because of stormwater infiltration. Now, we can reduce it, but there's no utility in the world
That can keep
that
it up.
cannot keep it up.
Right.
So,
But there's
Have
also
our-
projects on the wastewater side.
yeah, that's what I'm saying, but the issue is you can never be even.
Right.
Whatever you produce, you take back.
Especially here by the river.
Yeah.
Well, can you justify using some of the reserves from the wastewater to fix stormwater? I know it's a whole separate fund, but if stormwater is causing the problem at the wastewater,
No, it's,
you
no.
can't
They're
cross
separate
it.
enterprise funds, and there's a connection there, there's a link, but you really have to treat them as separate. So, and that's what this, Antoine and Joseph have been doing, is focusing on how to resolve stormwater problem because it's the stormwater
But
that's
stormwater is
going
creating
into
the wastewater
our
problem.
wastewater plant.
But it's some of it's groundwater too. It's just,
Right.
it's just
Yeah.
leaking, the high groundwater table. Our sewer system is below the groundwater.
Right.
And it's leaking, and we have clay pipe, and it's fragile.
Is
What are
there
the
How are we
things-
gonna fix that?
Is there any quantifiable data that has shown,
We're
oh,
working on
because
that.
we've been, lining a lot of lines for many years, is there any data to say that that's slowing down, or is it just the same?
We line pipe day in, day out.
Yeah.
The problem is the system's huge.
Yeah.
We just did a smoke test.
Right.
It showed the west side has a lot of infiltration. We're gonna be studying that and addressing that systematically, going through the system.
Isn't it like 14 miles or something crazy?
There's about 11 miles of.
But the other thing that even I learned, Joseph was explaining that as we line some of these wastewater sewer pipes, we're lining the mains going down the roads. We're not lining the laterals that go from the road up to the house. And many of those laterals are in the water table. And if there's cracks or fractures or broken pipe, it's not enough for it to become a problem with the flow of wastewater, but it's bringing groundwater into the system at an incredible rate.
Right.
And
That's the homeowner's responsibility.
No,
It's between us and the first clean out, it's the city's responsibility. But it's, unless you dig up everybody's yard or camera those lines, a smoke test isn't gonna determine that,
Right.
because if it's in the water table, smoke's
Never
not
gonna
getting
see
through
it.
it.
That's true.
At
so,
some point, it's cheaper to have the losses than try to fix it.
Yeah.
so we did the smoke test. We put over 200 sewer caps on that were missing, so that's gonna help the water.
200?
Yeah. And then we had several manholes that were along ditch sides or something like that, that we found were, when it rains, the ditch fills up with water, they were leaking, and we've addressed those priority ones. The next step now is we need to find out where the flow is coming from in the groundwater flow. And that's gonna go, we have 30-something lift stations. We're gonna have to go through each zone, find out which the priority is, and try to go TV the laterals, TV the line. What is our real problem here? It's all buried and it's all under the street. So you can't just say, I'm gonna rip up the street, because now you're making the price 4 or 5 times the cost if you have to go into the street.
Right.
So we'll get it,
And
but it's gonna take time and a slow
is your
progress.
staff making sure too that every bit of this data that we're getting is collected and put into a system? Like, I forgot, what was his name?
Ray Beltrami?
No, that worked here forever and made all the maps of the city.
Well,
Walt.
Meisner.
Walt had all that info in there. It was incredible. He was an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure, and as I understand it, I think some of that died with him.
Yeah.
So
No, we've
I just want to make sure it's all-
actually got the maps that he produced, and we're getting more GIS training
Right.
to update some of those maps.
Oh, cool.
So, but again, the lining the main pipe is not necessarily the issue here. We have the laterals that we were becoming aware the laterals potentially are a bigger problem than the mains.
Okay.
So,
Another question for you, Joe, maybe, I don't know who this is for, but a common complaint from citizens is, well, when I lived in Daytona, my bill was so much less, and we see here today that it's not, it's a couple dollars. Is that just because of the way we bill it? Because maybe Daytona doesn't put everything on the bill like we do?
I don't know, our bill is inclusive of water, wastewater, the R&R, solid waste. I don't know what Daytona's
Stormwater.
bill is. What else? Yes,
Or no,
look at it.
Stormwater
That's-
too, right?
And
We get stormwater in
it's
there too.
stormwater.
Stormwater's on
That's
taxes.
No.
a year.
Oh, it's on your
Yeah,
taxes.
Daytona Beach on this is the highest bill.
Is it? Where's that?
It's the
Oh,
last
that's
chart.
Deltona.
That total.
I'm sorry.
Right.
So, but somebody may turn around and say, well,
Right there.
15 years ago when I lived in Daytona, my bill was
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
15 years ago.
I just wonder if we should look into the way other people are billing, because if maybe they're not putting the trash bill on there. A lot of people just look at their bill and go, my water bill is $130, but you said the average is like $30 or something.
The minimum
20.
charge.
Oh, the minimum, yeah. So, I'm probably paying, I don't know, $30, $40, but my bill's $120. I don't know, it might just be worth looking into
So
in the
is
future.
that a real number? You're paying $120 a month for your utility
Roughly,
bill?
yeah. So I don't know I haven't calculated exactly what the water and wastewater is, but.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, maybe,
You know, it's,
that's a future thing that you guys might want to look into. It's one of the bigger complaints that I see or get. I get it quite often. Why is the water bill so high? And then, you know. Yes, sir.
Mayor, I'm Sean's associate, Henry Thomas. I've been doing this for like 40 years. And for example, in the city of Titusville, just south of here, they have the perception they have the highest utility rates in the world. It's just not true. So I think, you know, the best thing you can do is put the facts out there about the water and sewer bills. And I don't know that you want to change the way you bill, but you should understand if you've got yardstick competition, because that does happen where you might be billing more services than they are. But people's perception of these bills, and the other thing I just want to add is that, you know, the results we got here, Sean and I were both we were very pleased because we're doing a lot of these studies right now. And I can tell you, there's not anybody out there looking at these lower rate increases over the next 5 years. It's generally higher than this, 5 to 6% and even more. I was just in Bartow last night. They're looking at 10% a year. So you know, this is, you're fortunate. And I know nobody wants to raise rates, but I think you can bank on the fact that we look at this again in 5 years, and you're gonna move to even a more competitive position. And those that are real low on the chart, it might be that they're not doing everything they need to be doing. They could be deferring projects and deferring capital. It happens all the time. Bartow, one of the reasons their rates are going up so much is they hadn't raised rates in 10 years. And they've been putting things off and putting things off. So that happens in some communities. You know, to me, it might be a little lacking in leadership when they let that happen. But you can't always just look at this as a report card and say, you know, we should be at the lower end, because you may not want to serve your customers the way they're doing at the lower ends, based on my experience. And so I think, you know, again, we were very pleased at the outcome based upon how much of this we've been doing lately. And, you know, we've had clients like Sean's worked with the city of Sanford for years, and they were on a inflation type, which is what I'm seeing here. It's very close to inflation for years. And it was very easy to communicate that. And then all of a sudden now they're looking at 6 and 7% increases because of, one, they aren't as fortunate as you have been to get the grants that you got. But two, you know, just, and Sean said it at the outset, the fact that you are putting in multi-year increases that are, in terms of a dollar impact, while it's not to be scoffed at, it's minimal. And so the other thing to think about, if you're the consumer with respect to these services, they control the bill ultimately. It's pretty easy to find 3 or 4% less water use, and then your rate's not even going up. Right. So if you're careful and you want to keep your bill where it was, with this kind of increase you can do it. When it goes up 30%, there's not much you can do. Right. But again, you know, at 3 or 4% a year, now compounded over 10 years, it is significant. But what other goods and services in our economy hasn't gone up that kind of increase over the last 10 years or more? Yeah,
What's the cost of the drink special?
Cost of an automobile.
I guess that sign's getting changed.
So unfortunately, we kind of, you know, people say, well, they seem like it's piling on, but, you know, this is the economy we live in right now.
Mayor, your water bill is 25, but your wastewater is 50. That's where you get to the 70.
Yeah, I know.
Wastewater is more expensive.
Wastewater is twice.
It just costs a lot more to treat water, treat it than it is to pump it out of the ground. And
so, you know, nobody likes to have to do a rate increase on anything, but you know, it's almost worth celebrating that our rates aren't going up much more than what the cost of living increases are.
2.3 or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good accomplishment.
Right.
And it's going down from 5 to.
What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
thought you said 2.3 was the cost of living. You
That's
said
what we
earlier?
forecast.
That's the forecast in terms of cost impact.
Something said 2.3.
The construction's what's killing us. It's amazing. I mean, you know,
And the
I used to fix a lift station, rebuild a lift station for $250,000. Now it's $1 million.
Yeah, yes, yes. Here in the city, we built, 2 years ago, we built lift stations for 260 to 70. Last one was 800, 700.
There's so much need and demand for these services in Florida. The contractors have their way. Over in Sanford, they've got projects they bid and nobody bids on them. Because it's just, the demand for construction services is so high. And Joseph is right. It makes me lose sleep how quickly these costs are increasing. Which is another argument for don't defer your problems, do it, because it's only going to get more expensive.
And we've gotten creative about how we're doing our projects and everything. I can't tell you, we have a local vendor that's doing a lot of work for us right now, Black Sands. And we went out for a competitive bid, and you know, we went out for a bid for the aerial pipe to underground. It came in at $380,000. We're doing it for like $110,000 under this continuing service contract with a local vendor that we partnered with. So we've done some significant things to try to take some of those capitals out, but we're talking smaller projects. Bigger projects, when you start talking about the big people, there's companies that, unless your project is 10 million or more, they won't even bid you. And some of them are 25 million now.
I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it. For so many years, our whole entire system over there, Public Works, is very, very old. Now we're going through obviously a lot of changes, going through a lot of upgrades. So, you know, this isn't going to happen every year where we're upgrading. Probably by the end of these 5 years, are we looking at kind of being to where we need to be and not built out? Obviously, there's always improvements to take place, but I mean, the projects we're working on are long-term projects, and in 5 years from now, we should be in a lot better place than
30
we are right
years
now.
is the projected,
30
capacities for these. I will tell you, the one exception is getting out of the river, the reclaim. SB 64 says we have to get 90% out of the river. We can only go there for emergency. We have plans to get there, but depending on how those, Ormond Beach is Big Pond, our partnership with Ormond, how that works out, how we're integrating reclaimed into our parks, and how much we can defer the I&I, the infiltration into our wastewater system, is going to depend on how quickly we can get there. The infiltration, it can be expensive.
But to answer your question more directly, at the end of these 5 years, shy of rebuilding a completely new plant, we will always have high maintenance improvement costs. Because as time goes on and we fix, other elements of the plant age, and then those need to be repaired. So we're not replacing the only thing. Right now we're
It just feels like we're making huge strides right now, and it feels like that in the past that hadn't happened. At least.
So in your July 9th agenda item, you'll see there's going to be an agenda item with the facilities plan for the wastewater plant and the water plant, the rebuild, how we're fixing them. You'll see the improvements we're making on those plans with those plans. I mean, they're pretty significant. We're not fixing everything, but everything doesn't need to be fixed, but we're going to try to automate and make new what needs to make new and add the resilience, meaning, if you need 2 pumps, right now we may only have 1 pump, we're adding 2 pumps. So we can do more repairs and stuff without, major catastrophes.
So long term, our reclaimed water, treating 1.6, 1.8 a day, how much are we distributing on a daily basis now?
Right now, we're only getting rid of about 300 to 600,000 a day.
we don't have the infrastructure to distribute it like some.
No, that's my question. Well, how do we get rid of 1.5 million gallons?
Well, we're giving it to places like the golf course, but we're also going to give it to Ormond Beach through the interconnect, and Ormond Beach can distribute it through their system.
Have we begun that yet?
Yes, we have a
On
pipe that's
Nova?
connected to them. Right now, our biggest issue is we don't have enough pressure for what they need. Some of these plant improvements we're making now and an improvement we're making at the golf course will let us start moving in that direction in the next year or two. Ormond Beach wasn't in a position to actually take it. We made the connection, but they have multiple needs for it.
Yeah.
But we're working together. I meet with their staff.
That's the one on Nova, right? The newer connection.
Yeah.
So Mayor, the city manager's totally right in saying that you're always going to have ongoing reinvestment in your assets to keep them, to extend their life and keep them working properly. But you can see even in your 5-year plan that the spend is dropping, okay? So you know, when you talk about will it level off, yeah, it is leveling off, but there's still going to be some necessary level on an ongoing basis. It's never going to go away.
Right.
But you can see just within the, so you are accomplishing a great deal, and it should more normalize.
Yeah.
So when you put new assets in, you know, obviously your R&R drops down a little bit and then it starts to creep up again, you know,
Right.
that's the story of utilities.
It's like owning a car. You're not gonna replace the car, you gotta change the transmission, and you gotta change the motor one year, you gotta change the tires another year, that's not too bad.
Right when you pay it off, your AC goes out. $65 later.
You buy
Just
a new
happened.
car.
Then you buy a new car.
Hey, don't you guys
Just
follow
resolved
Dave
that, no
Ramsey?
payment.
Well,
What?
just Dave Ramsey method?
Just drive a 40-year-old
Yeah,
convertible.
That's why you're.
No air conditioning.
No, I got air conditioning.
The only other question I had was, and I don't know if you have this number, what's the total number or total dollar amount of the loans and bonds that we currently have in the for water and wastewater?
Outstanding.
And I think we paid 2 of those off 2 years ago, right?
Last year, we finished on 2 loans.
Last year was 2?
I can answer that, I just need to.
Find it. Okay.
It's also in the mid-year report.
And there is a
What,
schedule in the
mid-year?
report, right, John?
There will be, yes, sir.
So while Sean's looking for that, I just want to ask, is there anything else you want to see in this presentation as we bring it forward to a commission meeting? That, you know, there may be members of the public there, are you satisfied with this? Do you want to see something, I mean, this took 45 minutes of Sean talking. And we may not want to do that at a commission meeting, we'll reduce it down even less, maybe to a 5 or 10 minute presentation.
Yes.
But if there's something else you want us to add or focus on, you know, let us know, and we'll work that into the presentation.
Yeah, we were also asking questions throughout, but I'd say it's important to see, take all the highlights, but I do want to see the comparison in there with the other cities. I think that's important for any of the public to see as well. Heidi, do you have a question?
Yeah, my question is, it's wonderful that we're just keeping it at a minimum 2% and 4%, but is residential, multi-unit, commercial rate, how different is that? And what's a good explanation of why there is a difference?
Joe, do you want to answer that? Or Antoine?
It's a volume issue. You know, your single-family homes are going to pay the least amount because, and what we did to try to compensate for that the last time is we based it on your meter size.
Yep.
So a 3/4 inch meter, they're paying the lesser amount, and then the larger meter that you have, you pay a higher base rate.
I heard the opposite for some reason, so
Where
that's
did
why.
you hear the opposite?
That commercial rate was less than residential rate.
Are you kidding?
No.
Who did you hear that?
We pay more for electricity,
Yeah, the meeting years ago.
right?
So it was years ago.
No, they-
And that's
And
what
they are right.
made
You
me
know,
upset.
we have the standard meters of 5/8, and then you got a 1 inch, a 2 inch, a 3 inch, 4 inch, 6 inch, 8 inch meters. If you're a big community like the big highway, Marina Grant, they got a 6 inch meter.
Yeah.
Is there
And they
water
pay-
per
they-
gallon rate per
It-
thousand?
It's the same per gallon rate, but it's a much larger meter charge.
Oh,
The one at
Same
the
for
the
gallon.
laundry, they pay the most, right?
yeah.
Angelica,
that's
used to be
additional.
Angelica.
Sean, are these
They,
across the board?
they are based on your consumption. your 3/4 meter is the same for anybody, even if a business is the same charge for the meter. It's the consumption too. If you're spending less than 3,000 gallons, you're very reasonable rates. But if the more you spend, the higher the rates you are charging.
The more gallons you use, the more you're charged.
So that's, well, I heard the opposite, so that's why.
It's to encourage conservation.
I don't know where you heard that from, but you're right, it's completely opposite.
And then there's tier rates, so if you use more than 6,000 gallons, for instance, the rate goes up a little bit. It's a tiered rate system, so it discourages from using lots of water.
Billboard in front of a church the other day.
Yeah.
I have a question. You're relining the pipes to reduce the amount of wastewater going into the plant, so to save the city money and come into stormwater, right? To come into compliance.
Right.
But as you reline the pipes, you have less encroachment of the groundwater, right? So if you have less encroachment of the groundwater, then you increase flooding, no?
No, it's groundwater rising up, not rainwater coming down. Some of the pipes are in the water table.
Oh, they're in the water table.
Yes. Sucks it in.
Yeah, our water table's only 3 foot down, a lot of our
Right.
pipes are 6 foot down.
During high season, it goes up.
Don't spread that rumor around. That's not true.
Already done.
Are there any further questions from the commission?
In terms of principal outstanding,
Yeah.
I'd want to double check.
18 feet, now 21.
About
Oh, no, yeah, it's a
$4.2
ridge.
million.
4.2.
It's not bad.
We're next to the river.
40
Can't do
years ago, it was
anything.
18 feet, now it's 21 feet.
The water level?
Huh?
The water level?
Thank you.
And you know, that's another
Had to
point,
use a jet.
that what we're doing here is not borrowing money. We're not going into a debt service. We're not going for SFR loans or bonds or banknotes to do this work. We're still
Right.
doing it based off the revenues, which is incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, you get $20 million grant.
Huge.
20.8 or something, isn't it? 20, no, 9.
Oh, it's almost 21 million, then we have the
And the
ARPA money, which was 6 million, and then we have another line extension, we're going out on 10th Street, we got 1.3 million from the state.
We're at nearly 30 million.
Population.
So, 28 million.
We got Joe and Casey
Sounds
stroking checks
tremendous.
for a couple million.
And we're still pursuing more grants, don't get me wrong,
You
we're
know how
pursuing
much
more
what
grants.
it's got to now?
Right now, we're looking for something to help with the reclaim side. But we'll see how we line up with these other cities and, you know,
Yeah.
it's gonna be tough. We have
Harry's got a big project on
the
that.
way the state looks at the water system is we got a mandate to get out of the rate. Our ratepayers are supposed to
Condo
pay
deal or
this.
something.
We're looking for grants
Residents
to help us get out of the rate.
rate.
But again, the way the federal government and the state looks at it is, your ratepayers have advantage to go into the river. Your system's cheaper, so you should raise the rates to do this. Well, we're trying to find grants to do it and be smart where we can. And we've been very successful so
Yeah.
far. You know,
Praise God.
we're not done yet.
Joseph, one other thought on your capital funding plan. I know you made the comment you don't like to be in debt, but you know, you're not highly leveraged right now. As I mentioned, you don't have a lot of outstanding debt. And I will tell you that in the utility business, unlike other aspects of our lives, debt is often your friend. And that is because these are long-lived assets. So when you finance them, even though there's an interest cost associated with it, and you have growing customers, and you're taking 30 years to pay for it over its life, that has a much diminished impact on rates than if you tried to finance
Right.
everything right out of current revenues. So it really helps in the long run to finance, especially large projects, expansion projects, things of that. The ones that recur every year, the pipelining and things like that, you should pay for it out of current revenues, because you don't want to keep borrowing money for things that are normal capital maintenance.
No, I get it. I just looking at the large number of reserves we have and, you know, maybe,
We're making 5%, so pay 2%.
I know, take some of those reserves, do some more lining, hire some more crews, fix what's.
You know, I think that's a good thought.
Yeah.
But in this business, cash is king, especially when you need to be creditworthy. Hang on to your reserves. I mean, use them, and use them in emergencies especially. And, you know, you might be able to spread rate increases out a little bit with them. But I think if you can keep it to a overall 3% a year, don't use up a bunch of reserves to avoid that.
No, I'm not pushing that, I'm just thinking, hey, we got these reserves, and we know the problem is the I&I, so let's take some of that reserve and fix the I&I.
Henry, what's the interest rate right now on SRF loans?
Well, for clean water, it's a little over 2%. For wastewater, it's cheaper than that.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes the right project, you can get loan forgiveness
Right.
with it. I mean, again, City of Bartow got a wastewater treatment plant loan for 0% interest. Why wouldn't you take that? I mean, if somebody's willing to give you money and let you pay it back with no interest.
So we'll evaluate that as we do these, you know, as we do projects. Maybe the sewer lining project, maybe we find that we want to do a larger project, it's more cost effective. Maybe we want to take a loan out for that at 2% interest or less. It's cheap, you know, it's cheap
Cheaper
money.
than treating an extra 500,000 gallons a
Yes.
day.
So
Yeah.
we'll look at that as, you know, as time goes on. We're not in that position right now, but we're spending about $500,000 a year lining pipes, or is kind of our plan.
About 500, yeah.
Yeah.
500.
So, you know, maybe we want to do $3 million. Maybe we want to get an SRF loan for that. You know, we'll look at that as we go through and we evaluate the system. But we're going to do it very logically and use our money as best we can. Look for grants.
And Doug Bell's been putting us in touch with some grant opportunities as well.
Good. Good.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'll tell you, our lobbyist has paid dividends for the very little bit that
It's
we
one of the
paid
best
him.
things we did.
You have really good infrastructure here, but it's very old. And you're going to start, that's what's going to, you know, you're going to have to start putting money into it. You haven't put money in it for years.
Yeah, yeah. All right, are there further questions from the commission? Any additions from staff? Any questions from staff?
When are we looking to bring this forward to commission for approval? Because we've got advertising requirements, right?
Do we have to do everyone has to get a notice before we do it. So we have about a month, right? Our billing is on a month. So we have at least a month to advertise a rate
So we'll probably
here.
bring it to the commission the end of August, because it's got to be effective
Yeah.
October.
You don't actually put the rates in. All you do is you announce there's going to be a utility rate discussion on such and such a date. So a meeting in August would probably be appropriate. We put it in the bills.
Sounds good. Any further questions?
Yeah, wait a second.
Okay.
So we put the notice in the utility bills that there's a rate increase pending?
Yes. Well, we put the meeting date on there. There'll be a hearing on, you know, August, whatever.
There's got to be a certain amount of advance time on that, and I just want to make sure that with our billing cycle, the last people to get the notice have the same amount of advance time as the first people that get the notice. So
Well, the law says you have to do it
Two
in
different-
30 days prior to the meeting, so technically you could use the entire
Well,
cycle.
we're gonna-
But if you want to be more, you need to start ahead.
See, the one problem is if you try to use that month, you got some people you're giving 6 months notice to.
No, it won't be, if somebody might
Be
get
like 2
6
months.
weeks.
So you want to give the last person notice about 2 weeks.
All right.
Ideally, it works better that way. That
I'll take
otherwise
it
people
longer than
say,
forget anyway.
yeah.
Right.
Well, we're at the beginning of July, so I'm not sure, it may end up being the first meeting in September.
We'll look at it with the billing cycles. It doesn't have, you could go in the middle of the billing cycle, the middle of the
What's
billing
an
cycle.
auto pay?
See, I don't have a problem
I
with
get
that.
3.
We got it all.
Okay. Yeah, whatever.
3 billing cycles.
No, I get
Can't
3
argue
bills. Yeah. And if it's under $100.
You get 3 bills?
Do you advertise?
I got like $400 a month.
Yeah, but why aren't they
Yes,
different?
but the
I
law
got the
says
house, I
it's
got the
gotta
store, and I
be
got the barbershop.
Yeah, but I'm
30-day
saying,
period ahead of the meeting.
you mean
all
at different times?
No, I get
In the bill with.
All
the-
at the same time?
Yeah, usually all 3 come on the same day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought you meant on
And then I
different.
open them up like randomly. That's Serrano's bill.
I can tell you how you can lower the bill.
Yeah, I know, stop taking showers. That's what Christmas, he's gonna put all his kids in one tub.
Get a pool.
He does that now.
I like that.
Yeah.
Get a pool.
All right, is there anything further before we end this
3,000
meeting?
gallons a month on a pool.
All right, seeing no further business, thank you very much for going through this. We
Yes,
really
thank you.
appreciate all your time and effort, and great presentation, and I'm glad we are where we're at. With that, there's nothing further. This meeting is adjourned.
You put 3,000 gallons.
I'll have a slight.
In the